Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Merck webinar on strategic frameworks. This is episode 5, Horizons of Growth. My name is Mohammed Nayal. I'm a partner at Merck, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar that will take us about 20 to 25 minutes. Now, if you haven't if this is your first webinar on strategic frameworks, do not worry. This episode on Horizons of Growth is independent from other webinars. However, you can go back and see previous episodes on our website. So just quickly about this webinar. So we're going to be talking about the Horizons of Growth model that was developed by McKinsey. It is a strategic framework that helps organizations look at their current situation, but align it with future ambitions. And this framework can be used to identify certain obstacles that stop the organization from innovating and growing. So just quickly about this company, about Merck. We were founded in Beirut in the 1950s. We moved our headquarters to Dubai in 1991. We have over 300 different courses in 26 different categories. We have served over 3,000 different clients in different segments, such as accounting and finance, interpersonal skills, project management, and planning and strategy. We are certified and work very closely with different organizations such as Heriot-Watt University, ILM, the Institute of Sales Management, for example. About me, my name is Mohammed Nayal. I am a partner at Merck. My background, educational background, a very long time ago, I studied engineering and then changed into business, and now I'm completing my doctorate in education. I've worked in the private sector in consulting at McKinsey, in the financial sector with HSBC. I've also worked in data mining at a software startup called Correlation, and I have also worked in the governments of Abu Dhabi and Dubai. So let us begin with this webinar. So the question is, why do companies need to change and grow? What is the reason that if they have a successful business model, why do they have to invest in possibly risky businesses and risk losing money on ventures that do not make sense? If you look at these epic fails, that should give you the quick answer. Companies like Nokia, BlackBerry, Borders, Sun Microsystem, and even Yahoo, compared to where they were before, their situation is quite difficult. Yahoo once was one of the most valuable companies in the world, and that was a few years back was bought by a telecommunications company, whereas they had the opportunity to buy Google. Nokia obviously is nowhere close to where it was before. They are trying to reinvent themselves, but of course they're worth fractions of what they were before. BlackBerry once was the phone to have for business, not around anymore. Borders, I believe, in the US went bankrupt. There are still some Borders here in the Middle East. Sun Microsystems was a very famous computer company. Also, it is not as famous as it was before. So companies need to continue growing and continue exploring potential avenues for growth if they want to be sustainable in the long term. It is not just about making immediate profits. It is about being sustainable and being around in the future. Now, there are potentially some business lessons that we can learn from cartoons and from fantasy books. So if you've ever seen the movie or read the book, Alice in Wonderland, So Alice, this little girl, she sees a rabbit running, and this rabbit jumps into a hole. And Alice is a very curious girl, and she jumps after the rabbit. And she lands in this strange world where the rules are a little bit different. So she's lost, and she sees a city, maybe about a kilometer away. So she walks, and she doesn't get there. So she runs, and she doesn't get there. And she runs really hard, and still she isn't getting any closer. She looks beside her, and she sees the rabbit, and she says, "Mr. Rabbit, I'm running really fast. Why am I not getting anywhere?" And the rabbit says, "My dear, we are in Wonderland where the rules are a little bit different. Here we must run as fast as we can, and we just remain in place. And if we want to get anywhere, we need to run twice as fast." So what is the analogy to business here? You, as an organization, you're continually innovating and trying to come up with new products and services. So you're running, and you're running fast. But what is your competition doing? The exact same thing. They're also running fast. So really, you are at the same place where you started. You're running and they're running. So if you really want to get anywhere, if you want to be the first, if you want to succeed, you need to run twice as fast as they do. So let me give you an example. In the 1970s and 1980s, which company dominated the photo camera industry? I'll give you a few seconds to think about that. If you said Kodak, then you are correct. And where is Kodak right now? It does not exist, certainly at the same way it did back in the 70s and 80s. So what happened to it? Digital technology. Digital technology came and completely changed the landscape. So the question is, what was the company that was the first company that invented the digital camera that really was the beginning of the demise of Kodak? So it was not Nokia. Sony is close, but it wasn't Sony, and it was not Fuji. It was not Nikon. All of those are important names. But actually, the first company to invent the digital camera in 1975 was Kodak. And this is a picture in front of you of the first digital camera that an engineer by the name of Steve Sasson, who worked at Kodak, invented. So the story is that he went to the CEO of Kodak and said, "I have an invention that will completely change the photography sector." And the CEO said, as you guessed, he says, "This is great invention. Thank you for your hard work, but this will never work." Now, remember, the CEO of Kodak is not a dumb, stupid person. He knows that new technologies can come and disrupt sectors, but he had some logical reasons why this camera would not work. So what do you think the different reasons? Well, the logical reasons that he came up with to convince himself that, this is not such a great idea. Now, some of you would say fear of change, but a lot of us are afraid of change, but a lot of companies know that they need to continually change too. But he really thought that this was not a good idea. Now, if you take a look at it, if you think about it, why people would not buy a new product. So one was price. That is correct. So price was one, that it was quite expensive. Now, even though that new technologies come up and they're quite expensive. So I remember my brother had bought the first plasma TV back, I think, in 2006, 2007, and it cost him 20,000 dirhams, or about $7,000 $7,000, something like that. And of course, it got cheaper and cheaper and better and better. So price was one of the reasons. Another reason was because it was difficult to use. It was quite actually heavy. Its size was huge. And when people, what did you have to take? Right now, we take our digital photos and it's stored on a hard drive. At that time, there wasn't a hard drive, it was actually a tape. You had to store it on a tape and then you had to download it to a very difficult process. And then the quality of pictures was quite bad. Now, if I had to ask you, most of you have iPhones and Samsungs. Some of you have other phones, but if I had to ask you, what is the quality of your phone camera, you wouldn't know. It's measured in megapixels. And the reason why you don't know is because it doesn't matter anymore. The cameras on our phones have gotten so good that nobody talks about megapixels anymore. So you have 12, 15, and after that, the eye can't tell. This, however, was, I think, 0.1 megapixels or something, and it was in black and white. So the quality was quite bad. So the size, the resolution, it was actually 0.01 megapixels, and it took a long time to take the image, and the images was in black and white, and like I told you, it had to record on a tape. So there are some logical reasons for not to use it. But what happened is the digital technology got better and better, and then Sony came up with their first camera in 1981, and then still in the 80s, people didn't use it, but then in the early 90s, people started using it. And that's when Kodak woke up. And it said, wait, we are the ones who created digital cameras. Buy our digital cameras. And they started actually manufacturing digital cameras. It was just too late. And other companies had won by bounds, leaps and bounds, and they were much better. And Kodak had to go out of business. So you constantly need to reinvent yourself, and you cannot wait until new technology comes and disrupts your sector and then say, oh no, I am going to catch up now. Now, in some instances you can, and what comes to mind is Microsoft. So Microsoft was very slow to take up the internet. And if you remember, if you're old enough like me, you remember the first browser was Netscape, and Microsoft had a really bad product. But Microsoft actually was able to catch up through throwing lots of resources, and eventually was able to catch up and destroy Netscape through Explorer. But then Google came, of course, and now most people use Chrome. However, they did catch up. So sometimes you can be lucky, but you don't want to leave it to chance. You want to work now on the future. And this is where this model, horizons of growth, can help quite a bit. Now, another example is Apple. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but if you read the book about Steve Jobs' life, you know that Steve was fired from his job. So he founded Apple, and Apple went public in 1981, and it was quite successful. But then he clashed with the CEO and the board, and he eventually got fired. So Apple works without Steve Jobs for 10 years, and it starts going down. So after 10 years, they ask Steve Jobs to come back. They say something like, oh no, we were just joking. Please come back and help us survive. They were very, very close to go out of business, excuse me. So what was the new product that completely changed Apple? It was not the iPhone. The iPhone came out in 2007, right? So quite a bit after. It was another product that saved them. And that product was the iPod. So Steve Jobs comes and he says, computers are not working for us. Of course, there will still be a market for computers, but we need to think about something else. And it wasn't that he created the iPod. It was actually, the revolution was he created the iTunes store. So what was difficult, there were always things like the iPod. Sony actually had the MP3 player 10 years before, but people didn't buy it because it was very difficult to upload music onto this device. So the revolution that Steve Jobs came up with is that he created the iTunes store and convinced music studios to put up their music on the iTunes store, and he famously sold songs for 99 cents or albums for $9.99. So people were actually able to buy music and use the iPods that actually also looked really, really nice. So let's get into the horizons of growth. So the horizons of growth looks at 3 horizons. So just to give you a quick overview, and this is the source of this is an article published by McKinsey quarterly about enduring ideas. So companies, they're successful, but their sector starts going down. Why? Because their market matures. It's a mature market. There is no avenue for growth anymore, or it looks at declining growth. So what happens sometimes is companies stop innovating because they're just happy, they're satisfied with what's going on, just like Kodak. To achieve sustainable growth means that you must work on your core business, but you must always develop new businesses. You cannot wait until a new technology comes up and then say, no, now I want to change. You need to consider future growth now. And this is what is quite important with the model. So the three horizons framework, it provides a very simple structure for companies to look at potential opportunities for growth without neglecting their core business. So what you do is you look at these opportunities in terms of Horizon 1, which is your core business. Horizon 2 is something you can start working on, maybe in the medium term, and Horizon 3 is that the impact will be in the future term. Now, pay attention to this. This does not mean that you work on something and then you work on something else after 3 to 5 years and then on something else after 10 years. No, you need to develop the work of the future now, but you concentrate on your core business, whereas you develop research, you develop pilot projects for Horizon 2 and Horizon 3. So let us look at Horizon 1. So this represents your core business. So if you're Starbucks, you look at coffee. If you're Kodak, you look at photography. This is the core that identifies, that people identify you with. So if you're McDonald's, they identify you with the Big Mac. You continue focusing on the Big Mac. Here, it's about squeezing as much money as you can from your cash cow from your current model, your current core business. So if you're just starting, if Nike, for example, is just starting out, their core business was, their shoes, right? So this is Horizon 1, and then you start looking at the same time. So you're working at your core business, you start looking at Horizon 2. So this is emerging opportunities. So you're constantly looking what's out there. So maybe you're Kodak and you see digital photography. So this is something that potentially can generate profits in 3 to 5 years. So you don't say, oh, I'm going to wait for 3 to 5 years and then I'm going to invest in it. You actually make an investment now, even though it might not materialize. This can require a considerable investment, but you're buying an insurance policy and you're diversifying for tomorrow. So you're doing it now. You're not waiting until the future. Horizon 3, this is ideas that are maybe down the line in 10 years. Very profitable growth in the future. So here, this is long-term research projects. but you have to initiate them now. You have to initiate pilot programs, or you have to take minority stakes into future emerging businesses. So one of the things Kodak could have done is spent maybe 1 to 2% of their revenues on digital photography, just in case it takes off. And you should really look at it now rather than looking at it in the future. Now, just for an overview and to summarize, the two axes here, the x-axis and the y-axis, are value and time. So time does not mean that you wait. You have to pay attention to Horizon 2 and 3 now. But the profits, the value, will be generated sometime in the future. So you need to manage your current business, but look at Horizon 2 and 3. Now, McKinsey in their research says that when they looked at Horizon 2 and 3, they said that requires a lot of input from senior management. The problem is that senior management, senior leadership is focused on what's going on right now. But what McKinsey recommends is that leadership detaches themselves and gives themselves time to look at strategic opportunities in the future, in growth that's going to come in the future. So thank you very much for viewing this webinar, and I hope to see you in future webinars. We have different strategy courses on our website. Please take a look at it at merck.com. And we have specifically courses that focus on strategic thinking and planning, analytical thinking, evidence-based decision-making, and also on business analysis and data analysis. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you viewing this webinar, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much and take care.
Merck.com